All right, my name is John Cowan, and this is a look into the book, Hold to a Dream, a Newgrass Odyssey, which came out in May of this year. I think what I'm going to do is describe exactly how this all happened, which was kind of serendipitous, believe it or not. In 1987, I was in treatment for opiate addiction here in Nashville at a place called the Baptist Care Unit. And I got a call from my friend Paul Worley, who's a legendary Nashville producer here. I got a message that I had a call from him, and they let me use the phone. By the way, I'm still sober after all these years, so 37 years. And Paul was asking if I would be willing to come and do a session singing a commercial for Coors Light. And I said, well, yes, I think that's fine. But in the meantime, so when I took it to the people at the treatment center, they were like, we can't let you go sing a commercial about beer. And thankfully, the woman that was my counselor went, well, now just wait a minute. This is how the guy makes a living. You can't deny him a financial opportunity just because you don't like who the people that, you know. So they let me out for the day. And I went to the studio and I sang a commercial. The vendors was this big advertising firm out of Chicago called Foot Cone. I think Foot Cone Building, I think. Anyways. And they had sent the guy that was in charge of doing the music to Nashville to work with Paul. His name was Jimmy Schwartz, who ended up being the co-writer on this book. So that started a fast friendship with me and Jim. Jim and I we started hanging out, even though he lived in Chicago. And I invited him to go to Telluride the next year, which was 1988. And I think he came the final year that we played as well. And we had this enduring friendship that we just hit it off as people. And so every time I would go to Chicago over the years, whether it was under the John Cowan band regime or with the Doobie Brothers, we always have a date. And we always do the same thing. We go to Giordano's Pizza, and we have a deep dish pizza, which I'm not sure he even cares about, but I do. And so about 6 years ago now, I'm in Chicago, and Jim and I are out having our pizza. And I tell him about this radio show that I had. So for 14 months, I had a radio show here on WSM, which is the home of the Grand Ole Opry. And it was a peer-to-peer interview show. And when it got pitched to them, they were like, well, we're interested, but who can he get? Like, who's he going to interview on this show? And my manager, Brian Smith, and I had a talk about it. And he said, why don't you call Leon? I said, Leon Russell? And he goes, yeah. Aren't you still friends? I said, yeah, we talk pretty frequently. But I said, but he hates interviews. He's the only guy that ever blew David Letterman off during the show. I remember seeing Leon on Letterman, and David Letterman was a huge fan. And Leon's career was kind of not much at that point, but because he was such a fan of David Letterman, was such a fan of Leon, he had him on the show. And so Leon plays a song, and then he goes over to talk to him. And he starts asking Leon questions, and Leon keeps answering in monosyllables. Mm-hmm, no, yeah, no, stroking his beard. Let me turn my phone off. I don't know what it's doing. Hold on a minute, sorry.
It's always the fear of an interviewer.
Yeah, anyways. So I call up Leon, and I said, Leon, I had this opportunity to do this radio show on WSM. Would you be my guest? And he was like, yeah, I'll do it, which shocked me because he hates interviews. So I went back to the WSM and said, well, I think my first guest is going to be Leon Russell. And they went, holy shit, okay, you can have a radio show. So that's how that started. So I had it for 14 months. It was just an hour a day. But the guests I had on it were quite amazing. I had Leon, I had Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues, Loretta Lynn, Rodney Crowell, Jim Messina, from Logs and Messina and Poco, Chris Hillman from the Byrds, and everybody knows Chris. I had Sam Bush, I had Béla Fleck, and I always forget some. Oh, I had Bonnie Bramlett, who never really does interviews. We were friends. Most of these people were friends of mine. I didn't know Kris Kristofferson. Had Sam Moore from Sam and Dave. Surely I'm going to forget somebody here. Anyway, so we're at this dinner, and I'm telling Jimmy all about this, and he goes, well, do you still have the audio files from these interviews? I said, yeah, of course. So I sent a thumb drive to him of all these interviews that appeared in the book. And about 6 weeks later, I get a big package to my house. And I open it up, and he didn't do this digitally, he did it by hand. He transcribed every word of every interview. And I said, well, why did you do that? And he said, because I think it's a book. I was like, well, that's interesting. Let me think about this. So I happened to be doing the 50th anniversary of Will the Circle Be Unbroken here. It was at this country music CMA concert hall they have over there. It's very nice. And of course, I've known all those guys since 1975. And John McEwen happened to have a book coming out. And I said, oh, you have a book coming out. That's interesting. Who's the publisher? And he told me, and he said, well, the guy that represents the publisher is here. Do you want to meet him? And I said, well, of course I want to meet him. So they were interested in doing this book. So I sent them we sent them all the interviews with the audio and the printed interviews as they were. And they came back and they said, we think it'd be a really good idea if you write an introduction for each interview in your own words about what these artists, what effect they've had on your life. So I went, and little by little, Jim would call me about every 6 weeks and go, how many of you got done? I'd be like, 1.5. So it took about 3 or 4 years for me to finally finish it. But then they came back after I had done the intros, and they said, well, we think you write really well. What about writing a bit of a memoir about your life in Newgrass Revival? So I wrote a whole section in this book, which is the Newgrass Odyssey section, which is my life growing up from pretty much when I started playing music to when I joined Newgrass Revival in 1974. And the book goes up to the end of that band, which the last show we did was New Year's 1989, 1990. We opened for the Grateful Dead and Bonnie Raitt at Oakland Coliseum. So the book goes from when I started playing music, the memoir part, up to 1989. And we turned it in, and after, the typical legal maneuvering that you have to do with publishing and music that has to do with publishing, we agreed, and the book came out in May. And that's pretty much how it all happened from beginning to end, the genesis to the omega, I guess you'd say. And it was, doing the interviews for me was pretty stimulating. I also interviewed Gordon Stoker, who was the leader of the Jordanaires, and I had gotten to be friends with Gordon. I met him probably in 1988. We were at some kind of music business thing here in Nashville, and I knew who he was. And I made a beeline over to him, and he was like, you're John Cowan from the Newgrass Revival. And I was like, what? You know who I am? He goes, yeah, I'm a big fan. So it was really important for me to have Gordon in there. I think there should be a documentary about the Jordanaires, and I don't know why that hasn't happened yet. I mean, he told me that this is a real figure. He told me that they, as the Jordanaires, appeared on so many records that the equivalent of the sale of those albums together is $850 million. All those records combined, all the Elvis, all the Patsy Cline. They did so much stuff here that people are unaware of. So much of music you hear from the late 50s up into the mid 70s is the Jordanaires accompanying whoever the vocalists happened to be at the time. I'm sorry? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, their mark they left on popular music is is indelible. It's unbelievable. It amazes me, actually. And as a singer, it really is, I'm so attracted to what they've done. I think it's because I grew up in a home where my dad was in barbershop quartet. So I had at least a little understanding of what it takes to do what they did so well for so long. And I'll never know which producers suggested which parts or how much. We talk about this in the interview, and Gordon did say that at some point they kind of had free reign. The producers would go, well, what do you guys think? And they'd go back and huddle around the piano. Gordon was a pianist player, and they'd arrange these parts, and they'd come back and they'd say, well, come in here, what do you think of this? And they'd either go, yeah, that's great, or I want something different. So that was, and he's passed away not too terribly long after that, and he was just the dearest man, completely humble, considering all they had done in their lives. Yeah, right. I know, right? Blue Christmas. Now, I guess what I'll ask is anybody has any questions pertaining to all this beautiful mess here that's sitting in front of me. Keep going? Okay.
So, was there anybody in the book that you interviewed that was like your ultimate dream interview? They were friends, but was there anybody that you said after the fact, my gosh, I got an interview with so-and-so?
Bonnie Bramlett for me.
Yeah, that was it.
She was my role model as a singer. In fact, in Newgrass, we did a version of a song that I think she and Delaney wrote called Lonesome and a Long Way from Home. And I just remember so vividly, I wanted Sam and I to sound like Delaney and Bonnie. And I think we did a pretty good job of it. And so my whole thing as a singer is like, her voice is so distinctive, it's just crazy. And she just has this sweet, long vibrato, and the timbre of her voice is, you just can't miss it. It's like Tina Turner. It's like anyone like in that league of vocalists. So, yeah. So Bonnie was one of them. Really, kind of all of them were. My interview with Sam was, I had my friend Mike Bubb, who's a legendary upright bass player here that played with Del McCurry for years. And after that interview with Sam aired, he called me up just out of the blue. He said, that's the best interview I've ever heard with Sam in my life. Because I just knew so much about this guy. I knew his family. I knew his mom. I knew his dad. I knew his sisters. So I felt like I was able to come at him from a place of knowing that you wouldn't normally have with people. I mean, we had a personal friendship for so many years and had experienced so much together musically that I think it made for a great interview.
And losing his sisters and all that, or never knowing his sisters.
Yeah, one of his sisters was murdered, actually. And they never, to this day, ever figured out what happened. It was in Florida. And she was the oldest, and he claimed that she was the most talented of them all. So, I don't know. How long was I in the rebuttal? Well, we had to edit them down to 60 minutes. And then, of course, and then the other thing that was kind of good about them that is not reflected in the book is as we went back and edited, I would ask them about each artist about specific songs. And they would name a specific song, and then we would play that song in the interview, which is not in the book, unfortunately. Unless you do an audio book, there's really no way to do that. Yeah.
Motel shots were the album. That's what an album. That's
Delaney, I think it's on that same record, but Delaney has a definitive version of Faded Love by Bob Wills that he sings like a gospel number, and it's just like, oh my God, it's so beautiful.
And Delaney's mother on that album, with Leon and Graham Parsons.
Yeah,
Everybody who played on that record
yeah.
in on it.
Yeah, Never Ending Love. I remember that too. And it's funny about it because the song doesn't even have a chorus. The whole song is just, I've got a never-ending love for you.
Well, 12 years old, and it was just like,
Yeah.
I was going to Atlanta to see my first baseball game with my little league team, and
Mm-hmm.
that was the hit in 1970.
Yeah. It was pretty amazing.
Southern.
I remember I was just a huge Poco fan. I just lived and breathed Poco's music from the first album on, especially the first album I heard was their live album that they made in Boston, which is called Delivering. But then after that, I went back and listened to the first two records. But I remember when I first heard Take It Easy on the radio, I said to myself, God, thank God, Poco finally has a hit. And it was the Eagles.
They played Johnson City together in summer '75, $6 a ticket. Poco Eagles.
Poco did?
Poco, and they opened for the Eagles in
Oh.
Johnson City in '75.
Oh my goodness. Now here's a good story that Tony might remember. Oh, you might not, but. So in about Newgrass Revival got signed to Capitol Records the exact same time that Garth Brooks did. And we had met Garth when he was still in school in Stillwater at Oklahoma State. And he had a band, they were a bluegrass band, and we were like his favorite artists in the world. No two ways about it. So when we both wound up on Capitol, there's a civic center in Johnson City. It's not too huge, but they booked Garth to open for us. Because we were a known commodity in the Tri-Cities. Maryville, anyways. And our audience was so rude to him. They like Newgrass, get off the stage. And he went to his manager at that point, and it was really hard for him because he loved us. He's always been so kind to us. Like he inducted us into the Bluegrass Hall of Fame. And he told his manager, I hate to tell you this, but I can't open for those guys anymore. Because it happened somewhere else besides just that place. Because it was just him and his guitar. And they were just like, who's this guy with him? We never heard of him. And of course, here we are.
He invited you to be on when you guys had a hit together.
Yeah, when he recorded Calling Baton Rouge, he called us all personally. He called me and Sam and Béla Fleck and Pat Flynn, and he said, I'm going to redo Calling Baton Rouge. We'd already been broken up for 2 or 3 years. This was about 1991. And we were like, okay. And he was like, well, here's the reason. I love you guys, and I always thought that was a #1 hit, and it pissed me off that Capitol dropped the ball on that record. So I'm recording it, and I'm going to take it to #1. Will you be on it? And we said, sure, we'll be on it. So anyways, that's the story of why we wound up on his version of Calling Baton Rouge.
And that's the only time Newgrass has gotten back together since.
Pretty much. We did do the Conan O'Brien show with Garth one time.
When I was in Bristol, Leo Ross said that she would pay me a nice bonus if I could get Newgrass Revival back together to play Rhythm and Roots. And I talked to Sam about it.
I'm sure I could tell you how that went. No fucking way, dude.
He said something happened. He said, I think John's done well. I think Béla's done well with what he's doing. I think we're all pretty happy.
Yeah. Anyways.
But anyway, you get all the superstars together.
Yeah. I mean, if the Eagles can get back together, anybody can.
Hell thought out.
Yeah.
So how long were the interviews before they were evidence? How long did you?
Well, I had to be conscious of their time because I could have done it all day. But I think they stayed at maybe 70, 75 minutes, and then we had to edit them down to.
Nobody had just went up. I mean, it's.
Yeah, it's.
I like it.
And right, it's hard to.
For an hour, I think that was everybody at the whole thing. Just, you wanted to go on.
Right, because mostly artists like to talk about themselves. But especially when you're engaged with somebody that actually knows what you're doing, and you know this from your side of the aisle as well. It's like when because I can tell you plenty of interviews I've done over the years that somebody had to write an interview because I was coming to town, and it's like, so what is this Newgrass music? What that kind of thing. Fortunately, I'm old enough now that most of the people that want to talk to me know something about me, so anyways.
What is it about interviewers that aren't very well knowledgeable in that? I mean, this just amazes me, and I see it happen in NPR.
Well, they may know something about contemporary music, but they might not necessarily know anything about,
Why don't they research it?
I don't know. I mean, the Nashville Banner here, we've always had great writers. Of course, the paper's gone now. I mean, we had Jay Orr and Peter that passed away, and lots of people that,
Do you think people in the music industry themselves that are artists are much better at interviewing because they have more passion and understanding? I don't know.
well, I think I will say that I think it gave me a leg up with even the people that didn't know me, which there weren't too many that I didn't know, but I think when a musician sits down with someone for an interview, you know immediately if they know anything. Not necessarily about you, but if they know anything about music. And that you'll find that out really quickly. So
That begs the question, how did you feel making the transition from being the interviewee, which is what you normally are, to the interviewer? You know, because you're different sides of the coin.
I was a little bit nervous about it, but I also knew that I knew what I was talking about, especially because everyone that I chose and came to interview, I was a fan of anyway, so I didn't have to study up on anybody. You know, I had there was some intuition going on there for me. And I think that's disarming, as I've tried to say to Lee a minute ago. I think that is disarming for both sides of the equation when you feel confident that this is going to be good, you know.
Comes naturally to you, doesn't it? In a way?
Talking,
Yeah.
not so much. It's taken me a long time. You know, some people are great communicators besides with music. And like maybe Springsteen or Pete Seeger, or we can look at that from all sorts of angles. Some artists on stage are not comfortable being an MC, I guess that's the word for it. And some are, and some are. It took me a long time to realize I just had to talk like I talk anyways. And just censor myself occasionally.
That's what it is.
Right, exactly.
You know, there's cuss on satellite, they call it radio. You can't cuss it.
Right.
John Cowan, uncensored.
We did a show here about 2 years ago for WMOT, which is called Finally Fridays. And I didn't realize that if you say the F word, they can get fined $20,000. And I said the F word. And I wasn't even thinking that, because I couldn't see that I had forgotten that we were being recorded. I let the F-bomb fly, and they've never called me again. I don't know what's wrong with that now.
Yeah, after 10 at night, they'll be a little more lenient on you, but,
Yeah.
you know, I heard a station in San Francisco at 10 o'clock one night play Richard Pryor's live album, and that was pretty,
Wow.
I mean,
Well, Bill Maher is now being shown on CNN at 8 o'clock.
Right. I saw that last
Saturday
weekend.
night. They're editing it down to putting commercials, but the words, the F words, the everything else.
Is it staying in?
Yeah, and there's a new show after that. It's their comedy, it's their version of Saturday Night Live, Weekend Update.
Oh, wow.
And the only person I knew in there was Michael Ian Black, who's really smart, amazing. And it's called Have I Got News for You? It just started last week. And that is, I mean, every other word is there. It's on at 9 o'clock. But I keep wondering,
well, you can cuss on cable. It's just what is out
right,
on the airwaves.
but if you watch CNN during the day, Donald Trump says a word, an F word, or somebody else says a word, it's bleeped.
Right. That's interesting, isn't it?
Bleep the news.
Well, that's their choice to do that.
That's true, but my point was that people that are just looking for news, where do you find them? You don't like 6:30 to 7 or whatever time it is here in this zone. You get NBC, Lester, or somebody, you're doing the news. That's the only time you can find news on TV.
Right.
News channels are not news unless
We didn't
it's,
have news.
less serious, but anyway, I've had people say to me, I turned on CNN, and there was Bill Martin, I wasn't that familiar with him, and all of a sudden, it does say up front, and
I thought Howard Stern took care of it all,
Well, he's on Sirius, so he can do whatever he wants, pretty much. I mean, I guess I would turn this question around to you guys, which is, that have been doing this your whole adult life, pretty much, from what I can tell, is what do you do when your interviewee is nervous, inept, or monosyllabic?
Leon Russell.
Did you interview Leon?
No.
Malcolm Holcomb. Start talking about his garden. That's all I need to do. Malcolm,
Just go with it?
because Malcolm never knew what, you just had to just,
Yeah.
and I didn't know what to do when I first started interviewing James McMurtry. I thought I'd just be as quiet as I could.
It's funny to watch pop culture things from this, people trying to interview Bob Dylan back in the day. He would just have at it with them, poor people.
Yeah, I guess.
Go ahead.
Someone that played my house was a banjo player, Mark Johnson and Emery Lester. Emery Lester's multi-instrumental, and it's just a little duo, and they were great. So I took them down to drove down to NPR to do the interview. Guy had done his research, and that's what. And all he kept going back to these guys had no clue, didn't know what to talk about. So he kept saying, let's go back and talk about the Steve Martin award. And he must have won it 5, 6 times, and they didn't really talk about it. And they didn't talk about any of his work. We get in the car, and I'm just rolling my eyes. I'm thinking, man, they need to take control of this interview. This guy's just start talking about what they want to say, but they didn't. We get in the car, and then I think they were like a married couple. We got Steve Martin, who was like the husband, and he had Emery like the wife, and he wines. That's why I say that. So Mar, how come we always have to talk about the Steve Martin Award? And then Mark goes, well, never mind, what do you want me to do? And I said, why didn't you guys have this going on a while? I said, oh, speak up, tell me, there's something about my project I want to talk about.
And that's what I'm sorry.
First interview.
So when does an artist step in on the interviewer, when the interviewer ain't cutting it, and you sort of start?
I don't have that kind of privilege. I mean, at least in my mind, I would never be rude. I'll just go along and pray for it to end soon. I don't have it in me to be rude. I don't, not really.
Can you lead it?
Kind of like it either works or it doesn't. I mean, if it's just rote and someone's asking you questions and they don't care and they don't really know anything, I just always endure it. So.
Could you watch?
Who, oh, I'll tell you, interesting, the last one that we did was Rick Hall from Muscle Shoals, from Fame Recording Studio, which a gazillion hits passed in and out of that place. And I went there, and he kept saying things like, now, do you have something to do with the Doobie Brothers? Or, because he was kind of giving me one of those, I don't know who you are, and I don't really care. But the minute I started asking him questions, he understood that I knew who he was and what he'd accomplished. So he got friendlier and more talkative as it went on. Did he? And there's the documentary about that. Yeah.
Just a better interviewer. You can interview the interviewer. That's better.
He was quite a character. I mean, he's kind of like Uncle Tom Parker or something. I mean, I don't know what to say about him, but he was gifted musically enough to know what to do and what not to do, and he made some brilliant moves. So.
It's embarrassing. One time I was interviewing Mary Tashian, it was my first interview with filming it. And I hadn't really had time to do any research either. I knew who he was basically, but I knew everything he accomplished. And but I asked him a question, and he said, "No, that's actually not true." And at that moment, I realized I hate to be bad at something. And I thought, "God, you just killed the interview." Does it just ruin an interview when you ask a question you're wrong? Like, you don't want to edit it out. Do you like it when you never have to edit something and it's just natural?
I didn't. My own. This has been the only experience of me being on this side. I didn't have any bad experiences. I'll tell you the one thing that surprised me when I interviewed Sam Moore. The thing about Sam, he has a chip on his shoulder because he's one of the greatest singers that's ever lived, and everybody wants to talk about Sam and Dave, and I did too. And he got a little frustrated at one point, and he said something to the effect of, "I'm just tired of thinking about that guy. All he ever did was spit on the microphone." He said, he spits when he sings. I was like, "No, I didn't know that." And he goes, "Yeah, and I was the beneficiary of that for 20 years." Sort of.
Yeah, I mean, when something is wrong with my video, so
Yeah. There's so much, that's a treasure trove itself, those two guys.
New York, recordings you have, I'm a sampler back in this also. So, are you preserving them somewhere?
Yeah, I have them. I mean, and someone else suggested that I might want to do an audio book with this, which I'm keenly interested in.
That's great. Some people have done that with jazz books.
Yeah, right.
Then they give you voice.
Yeah.
well, on your book, where do you take it? Where you go, uh,
From here.
yeah,
It's kind of like that. My experience with this is not at all unlike having an experience with an independent record label, or what I call catalog labels like Rounder and Sugar Hill. There's a million of them now, which is they basically pay to publish your book, and they don't do any there's no really publicity for it or anything. So you basically sell it out of the back of your truck for the next 40 years. Yeah, of course.
This book, I mean, I'm a Brendan Johnson. See, and again, he's got it going through life as John McEwen, formerly of.
Right.
You know, they broke up, and he had a double heart attack that one year.
I did.
Yeah, he was supposed to come to Philadelphia, and why wasn't on the schedule? And, but there's a wonderful one telling people about Cafe Lena up in New York.
Yeah.
It's
Saratoga Springs.
yeah, they have a streaming channel called Cafe Lena TV. And, that's how I learned about it from John, and it's like $8 to stream with the thing. And on your Roku, you can watch it on TV. They've got 3 cameras, so you're getting to see the whole show, sometimes first and second show. And for $10 a month, you get 5 shows a week, 40 shows. Mary Gaucher, I missed her last week. She was here or something. She was here, or she was there doing it, so I now go watch it. John did one, and the thing that I was surprised, piece of information you find out, I don't know who the other player he has, but the guitar player he has was the guy that was with the Nitty Gritty Group, third band for like the first 4 years or something like that. He's the one that named the band.
Yeah, was that Les Thompson, the bass player?
Yeah,
Right.
it's great,
Yeah.
to know 50 years.
I had John at my house, and he wanted some kind of big screen, like that he could project on, and I couldn't find a projector, so we ended up bringing out our TV to the pool. It was,
Well, he's doing,
Yeah, he does a video presentation in his
I
shows.
got into the city wire.
it was good show.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I had some friends that just went for the first time and played Cafe Lena up in Saratoga Springs. You ever been to that town? Darren and Brooke Aldrich.
Oh,
I
know
love,
that from
I love it
Helen
when you
Bridge.
sang with them. I wish you'd sing more often. I love it.
I'll see them next week on the repeat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
They're so great.
They are.
They're just amazing people.
and even had Paul Winter.
Wow.
Concert at they have a lake which is no wolves,
No whales or anything?
no whales. They used to have the white wolf or something.
That used to be one of my favorite records, that one he did with the whale. I don't even know what it's called.
Well, so did Judy Collins did the whale.
Oh, did she?
The whale album, yes, where she's singing.
She still sings great. Oh my God.
John, tell us more about you too. I mean, you know, you got your John Cowan, you did the Doobie Brothers.
And I have a new bluegrass record. I have a bluegrass record out now.
Oh,
Well, just the 2 singles so far.
I gotta hear it. And how about the movie Bluegrass?
That's a great record.
Fiction is a great.
Thank you. The new one's called Gotta Go Now. Yes. I wrote, this record will come out in January. I'm going to put one more single out, but the Eddie Sanders, who's an artist himself.
Yeah, it sounds, yeah, production.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a label that he just started. It's called True Lonesome. But you can buy you can get both singles right now at all the streaming places. It's really good.
I just wanted
Yeah.
All of us can join you on this table.
You probably should.
And then we have a mic.
this is like sitting down in a valley.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't want you to miss the opportunity to finish telling us about your book.
Yeah.
So,
You look really familiar to me. Do I know you? Yeah, you. Both of you.
I work with Brian Smith.
You work with Brian Smith?
Yeah, with John
Oh, cool. How have I never met you? What is your name? Hi, Scott. And what's your partner's name there? Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. And now the police are arriving. That's the bluegrass police. There should be no electric bass in that music.
the hotel, like the blues.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
How do the singles work in the bluegrass world?
I think kind of like they do everywhere. There's 3 different charts, but it's all streaming now.
Yes, so I'm in a different world. I don't understand that whole process anyway.
Yeah.
That's what they're
Understand.
that's what they're releasing it track by track.
I know they are, but I don't know.
There will be a physical product in
Yes.
January.
Yeah, you were telling me that, but I don't know else.
I'm sorry?
In both forms, LP and CD.
I don't know. We haven't talked about vinyl.
Yeah, focused on a track and to where you can.
They hear it, but they don't buy it, they don't possess it, do they?
They're not,
The
they understand, but they mostly just.
They mostly don't, so that's why I'm that.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, the singles are to get people aware, so that when the physical problem.
Well, the reality is for most artists these days, other than Beyonce and Taylor Swift, is we make and this goes for the Doobie Brothers too. Nobody really wants to hear it. We make new music. Nobody wants to hear it. We don't really play it. We might do one at a show. The only real revenue stream for artists is to play live.
Okay, so, CDs. Do you sell CDs? Because I buy CDs.
Yeah, we'll have,
That
we'll,
should never get it, like record makes you, but if just give
Yeah.
it away, thinking, oh, I'll just replace it with Little League.
Well, back in the early days, when we had folks do from Sound Exchange and we're getting that started out.
now actually, which is opposing his point there, which is I get revenue from Sound Exchange. Like I will get it for these 2 singles I have out because I'm a writer. So I do it's not that we don't get any money at all. It's,
That's only from satellite radio sound.
No,
Right.
Well, we pay Sound Exchange
Yeah.
too, but I mean, a small fee, but I don't think that the attorneys negotiated the best faith effort for artists.
no, they didn't, of course.
The rates started, and that's what I was bitching big time to them about, you're gonna make us pay this, and then what are you gonna pay that, and who's gonna, we were pretty intense about it in the early days when they were trying to form that.
Right.
And it's obvious now who gets.
The corporations.
I've never, I don't even know how to steer something.
But as far as the new music goes, when you're coming out with it, it gives something more to talk about. And so then whenever you're feeding it to the press is getting interested in it, you land certain articles.
You're absolutely right. So that's another tool that we have.
That becomes, you know, mom and pop kettle in Iowa has no clue that they love the new song, or, oh, I forgot about him. No offense, but you know, again.
No, yeah.
And now all of a sudden, if they book a county fair, they book the venue or whatever, it still leads to revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that had a ripple effect on the ticket price of gigs. Obviously, when income is shortened here, it's gotta be made up somewhere else. So that, then it's passed along, in other words, to the consumer.
I'll tell you a funny story. My great nephew is a really big fan of this guy who I don't even know who he is, named Riley Green. Riley Green. Now, he asked me they think I can get tickets for everything. Of course I can't. But I did happen to call somebody that his manager was her intern at one point. And so she called and said, well, can you get tickets? And this is I know that's how it works in Doobie World, which basic Irving Azoff world. So no comps anymore to shows. They said, but you can buy them. So I went on Ticketmaster to get, this guy's playing a 100th anniversary of the Grand Ole Opry at a the Opry House in October. And the worst ticket in the worst seat in the house is $150. So if I want to get 4 tickets, which is what they want, I have to pay $600.
So I hate that about the industry. I like it back when you guys didn't make anything. You just.
Well, they sold records back then.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's not that I'm stupid and can't stream. I can't stand modern technology. Okay, I am stupid. By choice, I don't stream. But, my friend just paid $350 a piece to go see Steve Martin with the, Canyon Rangers. I said $700 for those 2 tickets.
Playing tonight.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Last night.
Well, you need,
Terrible.
you need to get multiple nights.
No, actually, you guys, I wish you were making that kind of money.
Yeah, I don't.
I would like that. It's just I couldn't afford to come see you.
What were you going to say, Lee? Were you going to say something?
No, I was just, I had the wrong night for Steve Martin.
Oh, did he come play the,
They, at the Opry House, they did the Steve Canyon Rangers -3 plus Martin Short on Saturday night.
But-
Rich Boys and all programs.
wow,
Well, I think $100, nobody minds paying $100.
that's even steep.
Well, I pay $100.
I mean, I was shocked to find that out.
I know, but can you imagine $350?
Well, I mean, I don't even want to ask how much the Eagles are getting for tickets. I'll tell you something, here's something really interesting. I love Adele as a singer. I like her music too. But anyway, so 2 Christmases ago, I was visiting my family. We're all sitting around and people were, and my late brother and his wife loved to go to Vegas. He's retired. They're like, let's go to see Adele in Las Vegas. And I was like, that's probably going to be a little expensive. And they go, well, once in a lifetime. And so I went on and looked at tickets for it. Okay, the worst ticket in the house was $30,000. That's a car. I don't know how much her tickets are, but I bet they're not cheap.
I don't even like that part of the industry. I don't understand that kind of industry.
But here's the thing, people will pay it.
But we have as much fun on the front end with the nitty gritty grassroots of who knows who that is.
Right.
Well, wait a few years and
Yeah, sure.
you find out who Marcus King is and you find
Right.
out who Chris is.
I mean, did Brandy Carlisle ever do Blue Plate? It wouldn't surprise me.
Marcus, Sturgill, Chris, Margot, Tyler.
We had, I'm from Philly, so we had to double it out. Bluegrass anyway, they hold the tickets at $80 a day. It includes the camping, all covered. It's outside, but it's all covered. And December 1st, they will announce next September's. They'll come to the other. I mean, it was Ralph and Bill Monroe created it.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is wonderful. They try to encourage people.
John, could we talk about you for a minute?
Yeah.
On any subject?
On any subject,
Yeah, like,
Where'd you grow up?
everywhere. Lived in the suburb of Cleveland until I was 10. Then we moved to Pittsburgh for 2 years. Then we moved to Louisville, which I kind of consider my home until I moved here because I went to 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. Then in my senior year, we moved to Evansville, Indiana.
so in schools, were you a musician,
Mhm.
band, popular with all the girls?
No.
No, I'm telling you, you're so gorgeous.
Oh, God, stop it.
Who was your favorite musician when you were growing up? What did you like?
The Beatles first, because I was the prime age. I was 10 when they were on Ed Sullivan. And then I started playing music at 14. So, yeah,
Start with the bass.
I did start with the bass. And it was purely an accident. It was like,
Kris Kristofferson, who was interviewed Chris, and he said, I was a mandolin player in a bluegrass band, and they called me up when we come down and play the bass on these tracks.
and he turned out to be a great bass player.
He didn't even know anything in the band was formed there in the studio, I guess, by the record company or whoever that was putting this thing together. And
For the Birds.
the Birds.
Have you read his book? It's really
I
good.
haven't, but I did an interview with him right after Tom Petty died.
Mm.
And Petty produced his album.
Right, the last
And
Chris record. Oh,
I didn't get it. Is there anything that you've ever done that you did not get recorded that,
what do you mean? Anything?
like, maybe a live performance or an interview or something that happened, like was myself? I didn't get caught watching. Yeah.
There's probably a million things like that.
Yeah, is there something that's sort of,
Nothing sticks out that I can think of. I mean, about 1988, that band, the Newgrass Revival, we were just massive. I don't mean financially, I mean musically. It was just, as my friend Tim O'Brien once said, it's like, listening to you guys is like watching a nuclear explosion.
yeah, and I mean, but you also were doing the videos that were coming out with CMT and I love the videos. It's like some of the freshest stuff that was popping up in the mix of everything is, but I also got to see the show in Johnson City with Courtney and
Curtis.
Curtis at that X-rated theater that they tore down the street from the down home, and you guys were the only thing with John Hartford, that show that I ever saw.
Now, here's a really good story about that show. So we had just made our second album, which is called Dancing with the Angels, I think. Is that what it's called? It's the one with the two naked angels on the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but we had recorded 2 of John's songs, Vamp in the Middle and something else. Anyways, Steam Power, we recorded Steam Powered Airplane. And so we were there opening for John that day, and we brought John out to hear our version of his 2 songs. And we sat in with a car and, I think it was a cassette, surely. And we put it in and we played the 2 songs for him, and we looked over it and afterwards, and he was just sobbing. He was so happy that we had done that.
That's awesome.
It is Vamp in the Middle, you guys.
Yeah,
Me,
that was Vamp in the Middle. That's what it was.
I love that song that y'all do.
Yeah. So, I spent most of my 20s, we had the same manager with us, John, which is Keith Case. We all knew Keith. So we did hundreds of shows not only with John, but with Norman and Nancy Blake, which is, if you think about it, it's not a great mix musically. Because Norman, even when he was 30, he seemed like he was 80. He's such a,
Do a lake album now, actually.
yeah.
But
But anyway, so, and we had a PA that we'd have to carry around, these two big voices of theater speakers that we carried, and a soundboard and all the mics. And so every night before and after the show, we'd have to go out there, and we didn't have a crew. We were the crew. So I spent most of my 20s carrying around John Hartford's PA for him. But the bonus is we'd play, he'd play, then he'd bring us out and we'd play together for another half hour. So that for me is like, it's so meaningful. I mean, I've been so blessed, it's ridiculous. I mean, I've played with these people, like played and sang with Doc Watson and Norman, and I don't know, it just, the list goes on and on. I've just been so freaking fortunate, it's ridiculous.
I mean, you were there at the beginning of World Fest.
We played the first Merle Fest, which was on a tractor trailer pulled in front of the cabin.
I've seen pictures of that and some videos and stuff. I got there first time in '92. And, but I mean, you guys were, and you did the festival, of course, there with Tanks Lauren with Johnson City back in the early days of the '70s.
Yeah.
But how many festivals do you think that Newgrass helped establish, including World Fest?
Definitely Telluride. And I would say even in Strawberry in California, when it was still at Camp Mather, they had to move it into the Grass Valley, unfortunately, but it used to be in the park.
I think that's one of the most incredible stories and one of the most incredible things that can be brought out in music history is the beginning of these incredible festivals where we see all this stuff now and how, who was there
Yeah.
to
I mean, when we got to Telluride the first year, which was 75, we drove all night. I think we got paid $1,800, which seemed like a lot of money at the time. So it was dark when we drove in, and when we got up the next morning and went outside, we were like, are we in Switzerland? Where are we? But the funny thing is when we went and played that day, our audience showed up, the people that were going to become our audience. They looked like us. They were all smoking dope. They were all hippies. And it was 1,000 of those people in the front of the stage. And when we played, they just went cuckoo. And that just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
I think that is, to me, that is a documentary that's waiting to happen and it should happen because look at really what cultural and economic engine that was created out of roots music. And it started in pockets. Of course, Bill was doing the thing in
Bean Blossom. But think about Newport folk or Newport jazz, either one. I mean, that was something completely unto itself. I mean, and to this day, I'm so happy they're still going gangbusters, you know.
I'm so happy that Mike Seeger and Giovanni
There's two kingpins. They're like, they're at the top of the deck, you know. Same with Pete, Joan Baez, all those people.
what's going on here?
I know.
Thank you, thank you, Mike. Mike, I did an interview with Mike in Rosine, Kentucky, in 2001. They started the Jerusalem Ridge Festival.
Oh, wow.
And Dave Evans, and David Davis, and Sparks, and all these, you know, the Lawrence brothers, and Alex was like 10 years old.
Well, just, David.
He died.
It was JD's out, it was on my phone. It was just,
But I interviewed Mike, and I didn't tell him I was interviewing him until after my discussion with him. And I've done it a few times. I said, I've recorded our conversation, but I was good. It was a clean conversation, but I got that, I felt like that was a way to just have a comfortable conversation without someone, oh gee, I gotta, you know, I felt it would be more relaxed approach to doing it, and then you have the conversation afterwards.
Right.
And I asked him about the first time he met Bill Monroe. And he said it was at Newport. and with Ralph Rinsler.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that, they wanted to meet Bill, but Bill didn't want to have anything to do with him. He said he heard some things about us, and he just didn't want to have.
Wasn't Ralph the guy that brought Doc Watson to the world?
And he managed Bill after this.
Right.
But he said, he didn't want to have anything to do with this, and he said, we talked to Ralph and Carter, and they went up and talked to Bill, and came back down and said, okay, we can go up, and he said, we went up and had a very spirited conversation. And that was.
Well, let's say goodbye.
Oh, John, we need to get your whole story, every detail. Are you still switching?
Yes, I just getting ready to go here as soon as I get done. I'm sorry? Okay, come on.
Thank you, John.
Thank you all for being here.